our chat. We'll see it. All right. So today is January 17th, and we are live in the smoke pit with Kinter for Congress in the state of Florida, District 7. My name is Katie Torback. I am the president of 5051 Vets. I am a U.S. Army veteran, and I live in Jacksonville, Florida. So I always take interest in people running in my state. Rory, do you want to introduce yourself?
How's it going? I'm Rory, 5051 Vets Comms Director, Army veteran in North Carolina. I think that's about all that I usually say every time.
And then go ahead and introduce yourself fully, like give us your elevator pitch and everything.
Absolutely. I'm Marialana Kinter. I'm a Navy veteran, former nuclear reactor supervisor, and I'm running for Congress in Florida's 7th District. I got out of the military in December of 2024 after 8.5 years, and anyone in the military knows you aren't necessarily allowed to have a political voice, especially when you are in nuclear power. It is already highly politicized, and you risk entirely losing your security clearance. And so after 8.5 years of not having a political voice, growing up in a highly politicized situation, which I will explain further into that in a little bit, I'm sure, when we get more into introductions. I was absolutely tired of it. We haven't had real representation. We have no one fighting for us. We have no one allowing younger people to have voices, and the entire political narrative is being controlled by the same thing that just keeps escalating the mess and situation that we are in as a nation. And so, giant part of my platform is trying to rectify that, giving people a voice, fighting accurately, fighting with integrity, and putting integrity back to Washington entirely. And I'm excited to be here tonight. Thank you, guys.
I'm excited to have you here, right? Like we met in DC 11/22 in the streets as we were leading the march on Washington. It was a lot of fun, good time. And so I met a lot of y'all up there and wanted to get you platformed with us. So we're happy you're here. Yeah, my dad was Navy, by the way. He was on the Forrestal for the fire and the JFK main voyage, and I have his Zippo. So
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Yeah, and this like really cool patch. And here's a funny story though. So like we like to secure the unsecured in the military. And the Zippo I have has a name that is not my last name on it. So my dad stole somebody's maiden voyage Zippo, and it
That
is
is
now
the most Navy thing I've ever heard.
yeah, and it is in my possession. So like when after he passed away in 2020, I went through all this stuff and I was like, oh, that's super cool. So before we started, we were just briefly chatting. Florida's been a mess this week. We have session going on a state level, but on a federal level, Jacksonville and numerous cities across the state were invaded by ICE this week. Personally, in Jacksonville, Florida, I witnessed human beings being kidnapped. And what I mean by that, so that everybody hears this clearly for people watching, that it's not happening in your city. This is how it happens. Florida Highway Patrol pulls over a vehicle, an unmarked black van pulls up, people jump out in tactical gear that I wore in the US Army. They put that person in the back of the FHP cruiser. He drives away. A tow truck comes up within 10 minutes and takes that human's vehicle like they never existed in Jacksonville. And that is a problem. That is a big problem for me, for a lot of us. And so I know you are in a district that I believe it is also happening in. Is it not down there as well?
It is currently happening in Central Florida, mainly right now Orlando, but there has been reports of ICE in Seminole County and a couple in Volusia, but they are ramping up for a supposed and alleged operation here very quickly, starting in Orlando and expanding outward.
Orlando has been overrun this week. I do know that Sarasota also had reports. Kissimmee, a high school, got raided. So it's happening all over our state, right? And for anybody watching that thinks it's like, oh man, these people are organized. We're fucking moms and dads, right? Like, we're just like normal humans that are like, this shit ain't it. So, I think one of the first questions I want to like just kind of ponder over with you is, if you're elected, what does accountability look like? Because I know I want Congress to be as angry as I am, and I want accountability. What's that look like for you?
I agree. And I want to catch on something you just said, that you want Congress to be as angry as you are and as angry as the community is. And I completely agree. I do not think this is partisan. In fact, it's not partisan. The fact that we have an anonymous police force right now that's been granted absolute immunity according to the vice president and is going door to door, using excessive force, using no warrant, not abiding by due process, not abiding by legal orders that were given to them. We have an anonymous police force with absolute immunity in our streets, allowed to do whatever they want. And Republicans and Democrats, every elected official should be up in arms, demanding every bit of accountability and demanding an immediate halt to it. Because that's not the party of small government. That's not what small government looks like. So I know that Republicans should also be upset. And this is just completely unacceptable. So I don't understand why every single elected isn't banging down the door trying to introduce legislation. They are not required to have body cameras. They're not required to have any form of accountability. And I agree with you. Everyone should be very upset.
Yeah, we should be. And worried, right? Like, super worried about this. And so I think personally, like on a personal level, and our group as a whole has agreed that we think DHS should be abolished. Reason being, DHS was created after 9/11, and our country is no more safe today than it was pre 9/11. We are wasting trillions of dollars in taxpayer funding for nothing. There are multiple agencies that do the same work, and so there's a lot of overlap. And we talk about fraud, waste, and abuse. Like, that's it, because nobody shares intel. And so, yeah, that's our call to action is DHS just needs to be done away with. We understand that ICE agents have a job and a purpose, but their mission is not what they're doing at all. What do you think? Like, what do you think about getting, like, there's been a call to abolish ICE across the country. What do you think about that call to action?
I completely agree with redirecting all of the funds, because the way that the program is operating right now, with no requirements, like I said earlier, to have body cameras or to have any proof and viable form of accountability that can be reviewed after the fact, they're not doing investigations when excessive force is called, whether or not, in a lot of instances, we've seen just outright murder. We have seen that. That is undeniable, and we know that it's happening. But in other cases where people are saying there's excessive force, there's no investigation being done. And an investigation by any law enforcement violating laws needs to be accounted for. It needs to happen. There's no just getting rid of something, moving it elsewhere. And when you have a force that's doing that and you have no intention to reform it, and you have no intention to introduce any legislation to call for accountability, it's not sustainable. It will never be corrected if no one introduces the measure. And so completely breaking it down and redirecting the funds into an actual healthy immigration system where we can bring on more immigration officers, more people to get a yes or no, more people to do background checks, so that people, it doesn't take on average 2 years anymore for people to get a yes or a no, is really the only direction that we can go from here. It really is.
I agree. Right. I put on my personal Facebook, I think it was last night or the night before last, about like what I've seen over the last 72 hours, right? About authoritarianism, and this is what this looks like, right? And as veterans, and I come from a generational family of veterans, like, my grandpa fought these people. Like, what are we doing here? And I think one of the greater things is not being talked about is that it is an offshoot of the executive branch, right? And so we have consolidated power in the executive branch slowly over the last 25 years. But we're to the point where, like, now the executive branch has its own police force basically in the streets that's not accountable to Congress, that's not. And yeah, so we just want accountability for all of these people doing all of these atrocities. The ICE watch list came out. I don't know if you peeked at it. We did. And there's a lot of J6ers that now work for ICE. There's a lot of Proud Boys that now work for ICE. And they're all like white nationalists. And I believe, and most of the country believes, all of these people need to be held accountable. Every single one of them doing this job. Do you think so? Like the
Yes.
officers on the street and
I've
stuff?
spoken extensively that authority without accountability is dangerous. It always has been. The classic cliche phrase of absolute power corrupts absolutely every single time. This has been around for decades. This is not a new introduction. When people are given authority with no accountability and no checks and no review process, it has never ended well. And we've seen the executive branch so far try to take authority without having any accountability to themselves. And now we're seeing them grant it to their own personal security guards or their own personal federal employees and saying they're allowed to do whatever they want with, again, no accountability. It's unacceptable. It will always be dangerous. It's dangerous right now. It'll be dangerous if they continue to do it. And it was dangerous every time we've tried to in the past.
Yeah, I'm a constitutionalist, purist. And the separation of powers has just been like so muddled, especially in this administration. It's like, what's happening here? Because we're ruling by executive order, and then we're trying to codify the executive orders into law through Congress. And that's not how this process works. Is you're supposed to write law as legislators, and then the executive is supposed to rubber stamp it. And it worries me as somebody. I'm a policy nerd. I always tell people that, like, I am a true policy nerd. One of my bigger things is that legislators are not doing their job. They're spending too much time at home in their districts. We're doing too many investigations. We're not writing enough law to like change lives for the American public, right? It's like, do your actual job. Like, stop all this bullshit and get to work of like, how do we fix healthcare, right? How do we fix housing, the affordability crisis? And just, I worry about, the country when we're not writing policy in the right manner. And I believe in you. I've looked into your background, I've looked into your policy. So let's talk about some of your policy initiatives, right? Affordability, right? There's a rising cost in Florida. I live in Florida. Where like everything's super expensive here. I don't think people understand that about Florida. Is our housing was one of the cheapest in the country for an extremely long time. And then it has skyrocketed. Our healthcare cost, I don't partake in the normal healthcare system. So everyone else's healthcare costs are through the roof. Rent, if you're elected in the 7th district, what should Congress focus on first? Because there's so many things that need to be fixed. Like, what's your number one thing you want to like hit the ground running, first priority, day one?
The number one priority is ensuring people have healthcare, that people can afford healthcare. Everybody gets sick. Every single person gets sick, whether you're wealthy, whether you are below the poverty line. And the fact that people can't access the most basic thing, we as a nation pay within the top 7% of nations who pay into healthcare. And we are the only one in that group that doesn't provide any type of universal or single payer healthcare program. We need to expand on the healthcare options that we have. We need to ensure that we have specialty care, or we need to lower the amount of taxes we're taking to invest in this program that no one is benefiting from. We need healthcare. It is the most fundamental, basic necessity of everybody. And then we can tackle housing. I believe those two things can happen in a coordinated effort in separate legislation, because if we introduce it in similar legislation, it will not pass. But we can introduce more than one piece of legislation at a time. So even though you asked the single top thing, my plan isn't just to introduce one piece of legislation. These things affect everybody nationwide, and they can and will be co-sponsored. It's constantly being reintroduced and constantly being shot down. We just need small form policy to introduce to begin to tackle those two problems first and foremost.
Every candidate that comes on here, right? Because I'm like a strategist, and there's a lot of you that know each other now. And I see a lot of you in the same spaces that I happen to be in. Y'all need to like partner up and write legislation, right? And be like, hey, if you elect all of us, we'll get this passed. And it's just such a great strategy.
We've been working very hard at building candidate coalitions, especially in the veteran sphere, where those two coincide. It's a very large Venn diagram. And we were all in DC together, as you know, all the core people who are in DC. We talk frequently, if not multiple times a day. And that is the intention, to build these coalitions now, because the single off, one-offs it's not working anymore. And in order to change the system, we have to have a coordinated effort and a coordinated strategy to do it.
I love that. It just brings me joy, right? As like a policy nerd, is I know about like co-sponsoring, writing bills and all that, and how hard it is to get legislation passed, right? If you're just like a lone wolf trying to get it done. So building coalition matters, especially in that. And in the healthcare sphere, we're right there with you. We think healthcare is needed for everybody. We are the wealthiest country in the world. Why we don't have healthcare for our people is baffling. One of the reasons is the cost of healthcare is due to profits for shareholders and things of that nature. One of the things I always ask people that come on here and talk about healthcare is, how will your plan interact with the VA, especially as a veteran? You know that the VA is needed. We have specialized healthcare through the VA. So how does your vision for healthcare for everybody interact with the VA?
The VA will always be a separate program, just because there's certain requirements in order to qualify for it. So my plan is not to conglomerate them into one, so much as expand both programs, the same way that right now people can have coordinated healthcare with their VA as well as with their job or with any number of incentivized healthcare programs. So the plan, if you have VA, you should still be able to qualify for their healthcare just the same. We need to expand VA and veteran healthcare options also as a separate but coordinated effort. So although they don't necessarily coincide in that aspect, the plan for veterans healthcare and VA benefits is to expand it and strengthen it. We will need some privatized care in that specialty care. VA hospitals, no matter how large we make them, will never be able to provide complete and utter specialty care. Things like oncologists, amputee, when they make their
Prosthetics.
thank you, when they make their prosthetics and get it custom form fitted and everything, that is a specialty need. So we do need to expand upon specialty care, allow it to be privatized with the contracts negotiated through the VA, and heavily invest in the mental health and psychological health programs that we have through the VA as well. So expanding on it, utilizing the money that we have there better, bringing on more staff. Contrary to what popular belief might be, gutting the staff of the VA is never going to improve the VA healthcare people receive, and continuing to expand on. It's the only option that we have going forward. It's the only one that we need. They fulfilled a role. Every veteran, all of us fulfilled a role and we need to ensure that we're honoring the promise and giving people the health care they deserve, which is fully encompassing specialized health care.
Yeah, I mean, so I worry about the privatization of the VA. And the reason I worry about that is because of community care. I'm sure you know where Lake City is in Florida. Lake City VA is my VA, and it is a rural VA. I choose to drive out of Jacksonville to Lake City. And they have to have community care because there is no oncologist, there is no cardiologist, there's no pulmonologist. I was hospitalized there last year sometime. And they asked me like my blood type. Like, I went and I was so worried because when we privatize things and we take money out of the VA system, that's why we can't hire more workers, better, like pay better than the private healthcare system and things of that nature. I know that there is a large swath of veterans that are working on that specific issue of like not privatizing the VA and getting rid of community care. I like your idea of the contracts with the specialized care because I do agree that we are going to have to go out of the VA for some things. I don't think we can hoard every specialist.
If we could, it wouldn't even be a debate. But practicality speaking, people need specialty care that I can't even imagine as someone who's not medically trained. There's sometimes that it's needed, and that's the only time that I think it should be. When I say privatized, I just mean outsourced with a contract that's negotiated, not privatized and then they have to pay it themselves or the healthcare provider gets to negotiate. It should always be the VA and the federal. If we bring on more staff, we can have people who are dedicated just to negotiating specialty care. So when I say privatized, it is not an aspect of expanding upon community care so much as having options for specialty care, because like you just said, we'll never be able to have it all, even though I wish we absolutely could. And I'm part of a Common Defense as a member, not endorsed by the campaign, not anything like that. I don't want to misrepresent that, but as a member, I've taken a trip with them last May where we argued against privatizing the VA permanently. As we know, that was introduced in the beginning of the year. They wanted to completely outsource it. Efforts are still being made and talked about in order to do so. Perhaps potentially, as you know, we can never get a straight answer from the VA about those things. Their story and narrative with you completely, but we need to be able to negotiate specialty care options for people who have exceptional healthcare needs or get better VA hospitals. Completely.
No, I'm glad that I knew what you meant when you said it, but I know as soon as someone says privatize in a sentence with the VA, like people kind of like freak out. 100%. And so I knew what you meant.
Thank you for giving me the chance to clarify that. 100. I agree.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you say like conscientious objector, like people in the veteran community go wild without fully understanding it. But keep it on the healthcare vein. So I have a friend, a personal friend, that lives in Arizona, a female vet that got some non-evidence-based therapies for PTSD approved through her state VA system instead of the federal VA system, because I don't think a lot of veterans understand that the state VA is separate than the federal VA. And that's why some states have different, benefits and things. So anywho, in the healthcare vein, PTSD is traditionally treated through evidence-based therapies at the VA. When evidence-based therapies run out at the VA, it's kind of a shrug of the shoulders, even within the field, right, of like specialists. They're like, oh, we don't know. But we have seen psychedelics in small doses, ketamine therapies, and other therapies that are not particularly evidence-based work for PTSD. What are your thoughts about opening that up at a federal level of letting veterans choose their therapy for PTSD?
Not every form of therapy works for everybody. Allowing the options to pursue a therapy option that would work for you, I believe, is just part of expanding mental health, as long as they're being administered by medically trained professionals that have been approved via policy. I agree completely with expanding the mental health access we have currently. There are in Central Florida programs. I have participated in the Seminole County and Orange County Veterans Advisory Boards. And there I've talked to individuals who have programs, individuals not associated with the government, not politicians, people who have medical programs that use different things. Some use wilderness therapy, some use different psychotherapy methods in order to facilitate working through PTSD, and all of them have success stories, and all of them have people who have personal testimonies that it changed their life. People who have said, I've tried this, this, and this, and it didn't work, and then I tried this thing and it completely worked, because people process and work through things mentally in different ways. They have different avenues, different coping skills. Just the cliche saying different strokes for different folks, that's always going to be required. And so providing people options to deal with mental health and work through things is necessary. Veterans have always struggled with mental health in terms of statistics. What we've tried before, if it hasn't worked, we need to try something else, because these are people's lives. Veterans commit suicide and have depression and self-harm statistically higher than the average person, than civilians, than non-military people. These are real people's lives, and we need to introduce different options if the things we have aren't working.
Yeah, we totally agree, right? Because in 2025, we tracked multiple veterans cross country killing themselves at VAs, and the 22 a day statistic has not gotten any better over the last decade. And so I think opening multiple avenues of therapy, and I agree with you. So I sit on the Veterans Council of Duval County. I have for years. And, like, we have canines for warriors up here. I'm open to all therapy types. And I do think that on a federal level, we need to be more open-minded, especially with the rhetoric, right? Of like what's going on, of like, we're going to take Greenland and we, stole Venezuelan president. Like, we're going to be in another war, inevitably, seeing the writing on the wall. And we worry about another generation that they don't know how to fix.
We have to, at some point, elected officials and people who are introducing policy have to decide if their own personal prejudice is of greater importance than keeping veterans alive and giving them avenues to work through things so that they don't continue to take their life at a higher rate than anybody else. Which one's more important, your opinion or keeping people alive?
I think people get such like weird vibes. You're like, we're microdosing mushrooms or LSD or whatever it is, right? And people just have such a prejudice towards it. And I don't think it's needed, right? I watched my friend, Crystal, I'm sure she'll watch this at some point. Crystal's been working on that in Arizona for years. And I've watched her like put in time and effort for the policy, the legislation, the research, like getting all of these people on board and then getting it passed in the state. And I was like, still to this day, I was so proud of her, right? Like, as a fellow woman vet, like, watching women veterans lead the way and get good policy passed to help everybody always brings me joy, especially if it's going to help in the mental health aspect of our community, because we've seen the crisis line, people getting fired. We don't have enough healthcare professionals in the civilian sector or the VA for mental health. And it's problematic, and I'm glad that you want to expand that.
I believe that there's a misunderstanding when people hear different types of therapy, that people are just dropping mushrooms in their garage, and they forget that therapy that's funded through the VA is provided from a mental health professional in a professional setting.
Absolutely. And I am an addict in recovery, an alcoholic in recovery. I'm always very open about that with people. So I even have my own bias, right? Like I won't even try those type of therapies because of my bias as an addict in recovery towards them. But I want other people to try them if it's going to work, right? Like whatever works. I don't really care. So as a woman vet, I want to talk about MST pretty openly to another female vet. So in 2020, we saw the murder of Vanessa Guillen on Fort Hood Army Base in Texas. And women veterans cross country were over it. And we all stood together and through protests across the country to get federal law change to put in a different system and some protections for our fellow women in uniform. And it's not just about women. And I don't want people to think that. So MST stands for military sexual trauma. It is sexual assault in the military. I am an MST survivor. I am always very open about that. I speak very openly on the subject. I've been in the advocacy space for years. With the new RAIN report coming out, I don't know if you're into reports like I am on MST statistics, but more men are statistically sexually assaulted in the military than women. It has happened throughout the generations of our military. Rape in the military is not a women's issue. It's a military issue. Women generally take up this fight because of the stigma attached to it. We now see in the military today, because of the deletion of DEI or rollbacks, whatever you want to call it, all of the protections we fought for in 2020 have been eliminated. There are no longer new sharp rep identifiers in the military as well. And so if elected, do you plan on taking that up? Like, what are your thoughts about Congress getting involved and finally holding the DoD accountable for the epidemic of rape in the military?
I completely agree with you. We need to. I don't know if anyone has ever given any other answer to that, but any other answer would be absolutely absurd. We have an epidemic of military sexual assault and military sexual trauma in the military, and it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed head on. We cannot, I know there's been attacks on the what we would call the SAPR program or the sexual assault prevention program in the military, and they've cut trainings for it, they've cut advocates for it, they've cut people where in the military, if you're sexually assaulted, you have different means of reporting it with different levels of anonymity related to it. And they've made comments or attempts, loose attempts, if you will, to change it. And the problem has not gotten better. There's no need to gut the program that was introduced. It needs to be expanded. It needs to be addressed head on. People are uncomfortable. People are scared to talk about it a lot of times in elected official positions, especially people who weren't in the military. But every single person in office, every single person who has the power to introduce legislation or advocate to it must. It's, again, these are real people's lives with real trauma, and tackling it and making improvements on it, we would also see more than likely an improvement on veteran mental health.
Absolutely. You'd be surprised. Rory can attest to this. We have had some weird answers to that question in the smoke pit from fellow vets. I think the
wild shit happens in the smoke pit.
Wild shit does happen in here sometimes. I think that gentleman put it as women should expect that to happen as part of their service. So there are people out there that are completely a-okay with the epidemic of rape in the military. We are not. I was out in the streets in 2020 talking about this on a national level for generations of women to come forward with their stories. 2020 was basically the Me Too of the military after Vanessa Guillen. And we want accountability. For anybody watching that doesn't understand what accountability does not look like in the military, what accountability does not look like is officers being convicted of sexual assault and being retired with full benefits and pay. Accountability does not look like anybody losing their job, anybody getting kicked out of the military, anybody going to court-martial. And we think accountability needs to happen. There's a few problems with accountability, however, in the military. One is the Supreme Court has ruled that rape in the military is a job hazard, number one. And number two is the Ferris Doctrine. Are you familiar at all with the Ferris Doctrine?
I'm not. Would you tell me, please?
Okay. Yep, I always tell everybody watching what it is, because I'm a policy nerd, so I know what it is.
I will not lie if I'm not familiar with something. It's impossible to know everything.
Oh, no. That's
Firm
why
believer.
I love teaching people about it, because it's
Thank
a
you.
passion of mine. So the Ferris Doctrine is a piece of legislation that was introduced in the 1950s that says people in the military cannot sue the federal government for negligence. Part of the Ferris Doctrine was overturned in 2020 timeframe, 2020 and 2021. And we can now sue the VA for medical negligence. People were able to prove that the VA was hiring doctors that had lost their medical license in one state and hiring them in another. And so that was the burden of proof for negligence with the VA. One of the things that we're asking for is that the Ferris Doctrine be fully overturned and that piece of legislation be changed. Because it's not just for sexual assault survivors. We're talking about training accidents. We're talking about, negligence on a large scale. Because when we were fighting against sexual assault in the military in 2020, we partnered up with a lot of Gold Star families and heard their stories of, like, my child died in a training accident. The government won't tell us what happened. They just gave us life insurance and said, you got what we're giving you. But as an NCO, I know that sometimes when we do risk assessments, we do a lot of stuff that we probably shouldn't. And training accidents happen and people die.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that the federal government should be held accountable for that. And the Ferris Doctrine should be overturned. And individuals should be able to sue the federal government for negligence. Same with sexual assault survivors, right? We've known about this epidemic for generations. We've ignored it. We've let predators continue, get higher rank, and keep them. So what do you think about overturning that weird piece of legislation so that we can hold people accountable?
I would agree with that. People need to be held accountable. The idea that sexual assault, whether you're man or woman, is something that should be expected out of your military service is absolutely a disgusting notion. And not a military I would be proud to serve in if that was the case. I don't think anybody, because of a job, should expect and have the anticipation that sexual assault and rape is going to happen to them and they should accept it. And the idea that there would be no accountability for it is also not a military that I would be proud to have served in either. We need accountability. Rape is not okay. Sexual assault is not okay. Them being in the military does not make it okay. One of the first things I was told in the military as soon as we got to boot camp is not everybody who joins the military is a good person. And that blew my mind. As a 17-year-old, that blew my mind. I didn't expect it. But I was told by an 18-year senior chief who said it. said you're going to learn not everybody in the military is a good person, and every person needs to be held accountable if they choose not to be. And that stuck with me. That was 2 weeks into the military, and I firmly agreed with it then, and I will always agree with it.
And talking about it, one of the wild things I learned in 2020, talking about you being 17, joining at that age, is there's like a weird problem with MEPS too, that I guess I just didn't even think about, and it was a blind spot, is that there's no accountability at MEPS because they're civilians and the people are technically not in the military. And so it's like this weird gray area. And so I'm gonna do a lot more research into that. We did a lot of research into it in 2020 of how we can fix that issue too. And our ROTC programs also have a huge rate of sexual harassment and assault. And interestingly, even though you're a cadet in a program, it doesn't count as service. And so you can't claim it on your VA. We learned that. It's real wild. Last thing that I want to, and we'll move on because talking about trauma is always weird. But the last thing we have talked about as a group that we would like a commitment on is most people don't realize that men cannot claim MST. They can't claim PTSD related to MST through the VA. It's a severe injustice, right? But they call it hazing. They don't even that's the definition they give it, and so you can't claim it. It's wild, isn't it?
That is astounding. I'm gonna look further into that because rape and sexual assault are rape and sexual assault by no other term. And that goes into exactly what we had just been talking about, addressing it head on.
Oh,
People
yeah.
want to assign other terms to it. That is not hazing. Rape and sexual assault, and again, I'm saying those words very pointedly again, are not hazing. We cannot assign other terms to it. Elected officials, advocates, need to address it as what it is. In denying anybody the ability to report it, and denying anybody the ability to speak up for themselves is a disgusting notion, a disgusting idea, and unacceptable. And I'm saying it very transparently and clearly because you had said you've had other people say other things. No, I cannot be more clear.
Yeah, that was a wild smoke pit. Like it started great and went downhill real quick.
Need to watch that one.
Yeah, it was real weird. I won't lie. I know we're live. I clipped it and sent it to that person's competitor because I'm not here for that. Right? I can't. So moving forward from trauma and stuff like that, just as women veterans, we have seen the attack on women veterans as of recent. We see women in combat being questioned now. What are your thoughts on all of that? I'm not sure that policy can be done to ensure that women stay in combat roles. Maybe I'd have to research, but as a woman vet, what's your thought process on all the bullshit that's going on with women being taken out of positions of power in the military?
There's an extreme rhetoric going on with the administration, and this was the first thing I had thought earlier when you said that somebody had expressed the opinions so blatantly against advocating for military sexual trauma, was that that's not super surprising because of the strong and extreme rhetoric that's going on from the administrative branch that is essentially questioning military women's existence in the military and their ability to perform jobs and duties that they've performed above satisfactory levels for decades now. So that was my first thought when you had brought that up. There is that rhetoric going on. I'm not shocked at their attempts to demean and remove qualifications from women through just regular conversation and briefs given to high-level official military personnel. If a woman is qualified for a job and they're performing it satisfactory, there is no need to try to degrade or question their ability to do so if they're already performing it well. If a woman who's coming into the military can meet the qualification requirements necessary, then they are able to perform the job, whether it is mental or physical, because different jobs have different requirements of each.
Absolutely.
As long as we aren't giving waivers to do it, which we are not doing, that has not been the standard, and that is essentially what the administration has been insinuating, is different tactics to take away what women have accomplished in the military. If they can perform the job, and they are, they're trying to essentially erase exactly what you just said, women in positions of power, women's accomplishments in the military, and question the existence of women in the military, period.
Yep. And, like I said, I did research into, so there's a lot of single moms in the military that are doing the thing, they're serving the country, and, they have children. And when we talk about, the rhetoric, right, is most people don't realize that we had female engagement teams in Afghanistan. We have had some of the most badass warriors were women. The World War II sniper, number one sniper in World War II, was a woman. Most people don't even know that. It's just history. So going off that of like your upbringing, and I know that you emphasize on your platform about like supporting working class families because of how you grew up. So you advocate for like livable wages, and what's that look like? What is livable wage like in your district specifically? Because I know what, in my mind, a livable wage is in Duval County. I live in District 4.
Can I explain the way that I grew up for people who might not be familiar?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Dude, this is a conversation. You talk about whatever the fuck you want.
Okay, cool. I just don't want to not answer the question. I will address the answer to it as well. So, for anyone who doesn't know, I grew up the youngest of 4 kids. We were raised by a single mother. She had health issues and absolutely loved us completely and did her best to raise us, but we relied on social programs like Medicaid, free school lunches, and food assistance programs to survive, quite literally to survive. And so a big reason why I advocate for those things constantly, why when EBT was threatened, we held a food drive, why I talk about it a lot on my platform and in my website, is because I lived that struggle. I understand what it's like when those programs are the only thing keeping your family afloat. When that's the only food you're going to get is from food assistance programs or free school lunches, and being a kid and being very hungry and waiting for your free school lunch, and knowing that it is a reliable meal source, and understanding that these programs are what the government has in order to strong arm the most vulnerable groups of people and people who need it. My mom had health issues. She was raising 4 kids. We absolutely required those to survive, which is, again, why it's so heavy in my platform. And so a livable wage here is meaning you can buy food, you can have a rented home. People on food assistance programs, there's a misunderstanding that I've noticed talking to people across the state, that they think they are rolling in money and that they can buy anything and that they can use their food assistance program to get Netflix. But there's strict requirements, especially in the state of Florida, on what you can use with your food assistance programs, what you can buy. You can't buy hot food. You can't buy pre-prepared food. You can't buy a lot of things. There's very strict requirements. And then the amount that you get is not nearly what people think that they are getting. And it varies depending on how many people you have in your household that require it. But it buys the bare minimum food that you need to survive, with very strict requirements on what you can get. And so a livable wage is accounting for the cost of living. And that might vary depending on, just like in the military, we get different stipends for housing and for food based on where we live. It's not a one size fits all because the cost of living in different locations is higher. And in the military, that varies extensively between zip codes, even between 30 minutes away and right here. And so providing the ability to have that in a more dynamic way would also prevent waste. Say we're paying someone the same as a very high cost of living area and a very low cost of living area. There is going to be areas that we can shift the money around to ensure everybody is being able to live and survive. And so adjusting it in accordance with that. And Florida, I will say, does seem open to it, and the idea that we already have legislation in place to slowly increase the minimum wage across our state. But that's only a beginning. We need to federally incentivize it so that we can take it further and ensure that people can meet the minimum requirements to live in their area. And that's what we can do in order to incentivize it on a state level.
I agree. I don't think many people realize, especially in our state or in states that have a higher wage, like minimum wage, than the federal minimum wage, which is in most states, is that if you're a federal employee, you still make minimum wage, even if your state minimum wage is higher than the federal minimum wage because of the federal government. So I believe in a livable wage. Our group does. One of the things that we talked about, we didn't agree on, it was just a conversation, is the power of seven. I don't know if you've heard that theory. There's a book written on it. A few, I think like 5 companies now across the country do it, where the CEO only makes 7 times more than the lowest employee. And I think it's a really good idea. When we have, like Amazon, or I won't call out companies, I don't want to get sued. But when you have large companies that do not pay a living wage, and then their employees are subsidized by the federal government through programming for SNAP, housing, things of that nature, I do think that that is an inequity and is not right? Is that if you're a trillionaire or a billionaire and your employees are on SNAP benefits, there's a problem with that type of capitalism existing in this country. And I do know what you are doing through the SNAP crisis, as a matter of fact, because me and Rory run our TikTok. And I was reposting all of the stuff you were doing down there because we were doing the same up here, trying to feed the community and make sure everybody was getting fed. And our group, I still haven't figured this out, Rory. Someone in our group has religiously been sending food to the Revolt Resource Center in Jacksonville, Florida. Whoever it is, you're continuing to do it. And I love you for it. I wish you would tell me who you are because the Resource Center wants to thank you. But no, I do know that you are, out there doing the good work, trying to feed people as well. So I do appreciate people that do that kind of community, that run for office. I think it's super important.
I could not stand, for the life of me, it made my skin itch. I could not stand the performative politics during that time period, during the government shutdown, when Florida said they would fund 50% of EBT. Prior to that, they said they wouldn't fund it at all. And we had in hordes on the federal level and on the local level, politicians saying, that is not okay. That is not okay. Donate to my campaign, donate money to my campaign right now so I can fix this, instead of doing anything with their community. It was performative, and it highlighted, in my opinion, one, the wealth disparity and the wealth gap that's going on right now, where people say, oh, that's so upsetting for those people, instead of doing anything to it. And it highlighted the performance that we have in politics right now, which is, again, leading to that further and further wealth disparity and wealth gap. And I'm glad, thank you guys for also doing something, because it outraged me. It makes me completely just astounded that the fact that we did that in every elected official, and specifically, I'm going to go a step further and say every Democratic elected official that was pushing to expand SNAP and EBT wasn't collecting food. And I will say Central Florida is a little lucky because we do have a couple of people in Orange County who were doing that. Maxwell Frost was collecting food. Congressman Maxwell Frost, Carlos Guillermo Smith, the state senator, and State Representative Anna Escamani were all collecting stuff. But across the nation that they weren't doing that is completely outrageous. And every single person needed to. And I saw a gigantic push from community members, community organizations. You are not an elected official, and you were meeting the needs of the community. Countless religious organizations, nonprofit organizations, secular organizations led by community members were performing that role, and elected officials were not.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out to State Rep Angie Nixon, the GOAT. She is my state rep, and she was also collecting food in Cafe Resistance. And it was all about community, right? It was community members, JMAC here in Jacksonville, the Jacksonville Mutual Aid Collective, and the Yellow House was collecting food, and they built a bunch of cool little food pantries that went up all over Jacksonville where people were doing it. And it was an interesting thing to watch happen, is everybody worry about how everybody's going to eat, right? And I did not grow up in a house where we were food insecure. But I knew in that moment that I had friends that were going to be food insecure and their children were not going to eat. There were people in my neighborhood that were not going to be able to eat. And, that's scary. That's a scary thing to think, like, we can just cut something over policy, right? It's policy decision. And it just, it worries me. It does. But when we talk about, affordability, right? Like, grocery costs are up, housing is up, and on your platform is affordable housing. And so I'd love to hear your ideas on how to make that happen, because I build for a living, like in my real life. I build schools, but I was in the home building industry for a long time. So what's your ideas on affordable housing?
I didn't know you were in the building world. Awesome.
Yep.
There's a couple of options that we can take in order to help facilitate making housing affordable. People can't afford to buy a home, either due to, at any given time, due to interest rates, or due to the cost of the housing market, or due to the fact that the number one buyer in Florida aren't individual people, it's businesses and corporations. We can regulate that and introduce policy to regulate corporations and hedge funds buying out all the first-time starter homes. We can essentially regulate the housing market to allow people to have the option and opportunity to buy first-time starter homes, because right now, again, all of them are being bought out and then rented at outrageous prices, don't even compare to a mortgage, and are not being given the opportunity. They're not being given the opportunity to buy land. Again, one of the biggest land purchasers in the United States are corporations and hedge funds, and that cannot be allowed. And Congress can introduce legislation in order to regulate that and prevent that. And a big stopping factor in that is that realtors associations and corporations and hedge funds are allowed to lobby in order to get the narrative that they want. And so it does circle back, a lot of issues circle back to introducing getting money out of politics and allowing individuals to have voices, allowing organizations to group advocate in different groups, but not allowing money to flow from these advocacy organizations into the pockets of candidates or politicians. And until we clear that up, we will never be able to change the political narrative and introduce bills in order to fix these problems, be it the cost of living, housing, healthcare, as long as the narrative is being controlled by lobbyists' money instead of group advocacy. And so we do have the ability to regulate the housing market in that aspect, preventing hedge funds and businesses from buying up all the first-time starter homes. And then we have the ability to expand rental assistance programs, as well as having affordable housing construction, which you are an expert in housing construction. So having affordable housing construction is another option in introducing policy and reform, as well as having more incentives for local affordable housing developments, where we can also use it to boost the local economy and incentivize the states in order to boost the local economy as well. And then there's a lot of empty realtor spaces and realty spaces from us seeing a lot of people move to work from home. Businesses, we can repurpose a lot of existing infrastructure prior to it becoming dilapidated and wearing down over time. A big problem that we see in more urban areas is the decay of buildings that aren't being used anymore, and then it costs exponentially more in order to tear down and rebuild completely. Whereas if we get on top of it, and as soon as a building becomes vacant or available, we can begin to repurpose it and keep it in operational condition. And that's another option of introducing an affordable housing means. And it prevents new development as well, which is a big concern in Florida. As you know, being a Floridian yourself, new developments are a huge concern, be it with causing more flooding, pricing people out of pre-existing areas that they already live. And another way to prevent that is by repurposing buildings that we already have and expanding upon what we already have in infrastructure by taking care of it rather than tearing it down and building 200-foot or 200-story apartments with a 20-person parking garage, where we now need to also introduce a ton of parking lots.
Yeah, the urban sprawl in Florida has been weird, right? So I am a native of Jacksonville. I grew up on the south side of Jacksonville, and I now live on the north side of Jacksonville. And when I was a kid, where I live used to be all farmland. It was all horse farms. And just seeing like my area, because I know your area too, like just a wild expansion. But I think it's funny, right? Yesterday I was listening to a podcast. It had James Fishburne on it, the Republican running against Byron Donalds for governor of our state. And his policy is kind of the same of yours, right? Is I think that both sides can agree on that, especially within our state specifically. As you know, Floridians is getting like BlackRock type investment firms out of the state, and doing it on a federal level is a great idea, right? Get it out of every state. Like that's what's driving up the cost of housing. There's a few things, right? As a builder, labor is one. We don't have enough tradesmen, which then leads into like an education question. And I'm a elder millennial. I'm 38, and my generation was told to go to college, get a good job, and we weren't told about the trades. But I do think that expanding our knowledge base in building is one, and 3D printing houses is something that we should invest in. The rest of the world has. I wrote a published paper on it, and it's affordable, right? It's not profitable, but it's affordable. And I do believe that we should be able to, stop urban sprawl if we can stop large investment, and developers from coming into local Florida cities and buying up like swaths of land. I bought out of the city of Jacksonville, and recently they cleared hundreds and hundreds of acres off of 95 at Pecan Park. And I was just like, man, I left the city to get out of the city to get away from this development, and now they're developing where I live. And so I love your ideas, right, about affordable housing, is that investment firms buying up all of these starter houses or outbidding somebody by $1,500 or $2,000 that a family just can't afford that extra $2,000 to outbid. So yeah, I'd love to see policy on that. I would totally support that. That'd be super cool.
Sustainable development is going to be the key in tackling both the cost of living and affordable housing as well as regulating the housing market. When I've been a firm believer, I say it all the time, we have the technology and the know-how to develop sustainably. What we don't have is the political will. We do not have it in office.
Ooh, I like I like that a lot because we do. So 3D printing, 3D printed houses is sustainable. The way that we build houses, I'm a nerd out for 2 seconds. The way that we build houses in Florida, especially in our area of Florida, Southern Florida is different. They block build homes. So it's like CMU cinder block houses and it's all rebar and stuff like that. That's sustainable building, but they build like that because of Hurricane Andrew and like decimated Florida.
I
So,
was about to ask, is it because of hurricanes primarily?
oh yeah, you can't build out of wood in like the southern 6 counties in Florida. It's building code. But up here, right in our area, we stick build houses, so out of wood. And that's not sustainable. And so as someone that build homes, don't buy a new home. They're shitty. The wood is shitty, right? Like we used to let wood grow for years and years and years, and it would become hardwood and then like build with that wood. And now we're letting like pine, because most of your homes are built out of pine here. Like they're like 20-year-old trees. It's like still considered a soft wood. And so it's not even worth the money it's being built for. And so I am a true advocate for 3D printing. It's just not profitable, right? The overhead is the cheapest printer. I think I wrote in my paper was like 1.2 million, but you can 3D print a home, like a good starter home, for less than 100 grand. And you can finish it out for maybe another 35, 40. And so it's doable. It's just you have to not want to make millions, right? You just want to do it for the good of people. But like I'm here for affordable housing. I have plenty of friends my age that can't afford housing. They're still renting. And we were promised as kids that you go to school, you get a job, you'll own a home, 2.3 kids, a picket fence, and a dog. And it's just not happening for our generation specifically.
We were
And
all raised to believe in and expect that we could accomplish the American dream, but legislation, policymakers, public officials are making it impossible for us to achieve the American dream. They're making it impossible for us to achieve the base minimum of survival with healthcare and the cost of living and the ability to just rent somewhere. The American dream, if we don't act to fix it, will become completely unachievable to the normal person. That's unacceptable.
yeah, and I think one of the things that you said and I caught on was money out of politics, right? Is we're partner orgs with money out of politics. And I hope you took their pledge. Did you?
I did. That was the first thing I did as a candidate. As soon as I fulfilled it, especially because it's a veteran-led organization, so I was familiar with them before I had even filed my candidacy. And yes, I've taken their pledge, and more importantly, I have honored the money out of politics pledge.
You have. I checked your financials. And we are proud partners with Money Out of Politics. We have been since we started. And, I think me and Sean from Money Out of Politics were like right in front of you in the streets in Washington with Tom, Fight Against Fascism org. And so I am glad to hear you took the pledge. Money in politics is just, it's ruining it, right? It's diluting our voice. It's diluting our vote. And we can't compete with the lobbyists and the special interests and things of that nature. And so Citizens United needs to be overturned somehow. But like corruption, I know that one of your platform is fighting corruption, right? And restoring trust in government. And one of the things that we talk about is term limits, right? There's been a growing call for term limits for a long time. I think since I was a kid, they were talking about term limits. But we do realize that, and most people don't realize this, so I'm going to explain it. Term limits, if Congress was to pass a bill for term limits, it's unconstitutional because the Supreme Court has ruled that term limits are unconstitutional because it usurps the will of the people. And so the only way you can do that is to amend the Constitution, because then it becomes constitutional. So are you down for a constitutional amendment for term limits? I don't care about like the time can be worked out later. Just in general, like a constitutional amendment for term limits.
Yes, firm believer in term limits. I am pro term limits, the most basic of terms.
Yeah, like even our group really, I don't think we came to a hard consensus on time frames, right? And we had a guy on that I inadvertently called old. But I don't want people that don't have to live through law writing law. Right? It's just like you don't have to live through the consequences of this. It just seems kind of off. So what are your other ideas of like restoring trust in government? What's that look like to you?
Changing the narrative so that it, again, I know we just talked about it, but one of the primary things is changing the narrative so that it's not accountable anymore to lobbyists and people who can pay to have a narrative. That's been being studied for decades, is that people with more money have the belief and feeling that they have more voice in politics because they do. They have more sway, they have more ability to be heard, they have more means of accessing politicians and elected officials or people who introduce or write legislation in order to get their opinion and voice heard. And their opinion and voices are typically focused on ideas and morality rather than people who have less money, who their ideas are focused on survival. And so they don't have the means to access all of these different things because they're focused on survival, food, housing, all of those. And so the first step in it, again, and I said this earlier when we talked about housing and healthcare, the first step of any political improvement is making it so that people's voices can be heard and that politicians are responsible to them, not responsible to the lobbyists or whoever is putting money in their pocket, special interest groups. Another one, very basic, one, introducing term limits on the Supreme Court and Congress and Senate. All three of those is another way to restore trust in the government and not have complacency, not have locked in to just one thing. We need term limits on all of those in order to have a dynamic and ever-changing government branch that reflects the fact that our nation is dynamic and ever-changing as well. And then banning congressional stock trading is an absolute must. The person who is introducing legislation and regulating a market should not have the ability to then profit off the decisions they're making for the general public. Another one is regulating cryptocurrency contributions and regulating the cryptocurrency market, because as long as we have anonymous and unregulated cryptocurrency contributions, we will always have an anonymous backdoor alleyway into our politics. Whether it's through foreign interference or through wealthy donor interference, there will always be an anonymous backdoor unless we regulate and prevent anonymous cryptocurrency donations to politicians and legislators. That's another must.
I think of that. Like I hold crypto, right? Like, and bro, that's right. Like as soon as you said it, I was like, oh shit, she's right. Like, I'm like, oh man, she's totally right on that one.
And the final one that I paused for a second because I wasn't sure if it looked like you were you about to say something? I wanted to give the opportunity.
That's wild.
And the next one and one of the most important is then enforcing and holding those in office accountable for those standards or expectations and legislation that we introduce. Laws are only as good, and we're seeing this with the administration. We're seeing it across the board, across the nation, in different cities and states. Laws and standards are only good if you enforce them. You can say one thing, but if you don't enforce it or regulate it, then it is as good as null. We have to hold them accountable and regulate them. That is one of the most front and foremost. Nothing else will change unless we have accountability.
One of the and I've been thinking about this, like an accountability measure is for Congress, like y'all are the purse, right? And it's been disheartening to see so many Dems, like sitting Dems, saying that, like, we're not going to defund DHS, and it's like how else are you going to hold these people accountable? Besides impeachment, right? And you were at a removal coalition action when I met you. And so we're fans of the Constitution in this group. That's what we're, a nonpartisan group. Most people don't understand that. But we're bound together by our oath to the Constitution, right? And we have agreed that certain people need to be impeached. And I understand from, like, most people don't understand how impeachment works. It's a 2/3 majority of both the House and the Senate. And I'm hoping that we get enough seats to impeach certain individuals. And most people, it's in the Constitution, more people should actually read the Constitution, is that if you impeach the president for treason, his entire cabinet goes with him. And so would you be down? I know you would, but just for the record, are you on board to impeach, at least, in the very least, Tom Homan for bribery, because that's 100% proven, Pete Hegseth for war crimes, because that's 100% proven, and for Kristi Noem for crimes against humanity, because that's 100% proven.
Yes, and I want to include, for people who might not be quite so certain on impeachment can only be performed with illegal action that has been taken. In articles of impeachment, it must list illegal actions. And the thing about breaking the law and having illegal actions is it's either illegal or it's not. You can't impeach somebody and you can't introduce articles of impeachment. You can't introduce them. They will not pass. You will not have a majority. They will not go through. You can only do it if they've done something illegal. It is our means of holding those in office accountable. If we keep saying it's too far when people do things that are illegal, that violates their role, that violates the law, it takes away our power. That's why it is that's why it is written in that we have the ability to impeach. It is the means to hold accountability in office. So I just need that to be said, that you can only do it if they do things illegal. And if people do things illegal, we must hold them accountable.
I think that's why so many veterans, like, especially like across groups, are angry, is because the violation of the Constitution is kind of a red line for most veterans. Although we do see a lot of veterans sitting on the wrong side of history currently, is, due process, freedom of speech, all of it. And there's been no accountability, right? Is everybody's like, oh, we're just not going to investigate the murder of a woman in the middle of the street by a federal agent, and we're going to move him and his family with your tax money.
Right now, just so I can get their exact verbiage, something nonpartisan, veteran related that I saw that I absolutely was amazed by and loved, and have not heard very many people talk about, despite the fact that it was a while ago, was the Senate committee issuing a letter to Pete Hegseth demanding accountability, the Armed Services Committee demanding accountability from Pete Hegseth about the operations going on in the Caribbean with the boat strikes prior to us taking military action against Venezuela. This was issued back out in September after the September strikes. That was the beginning of it, where they had said, and I would like to pull up the whole letter in a moment, which had specifically said, you have not provided the proof. And we saw them begin to take back their power and accountability. And it's specific because it's about the military. And that's, again, nonpartisan. We have people in every political party in the military, where they said, we will be forced, if you continue to not comply, we will be forced to not provide the remainder of the funding. And so I'm going to pull that up real quick if you don't mind, because I absolutely loved it. And I haven't heard people talk about it until just recently, despite that letter going out. And very rarely is there a public letter reprimanding, almost, because the tone of it was a reprimand. You have failed to produce this proof that is required. You're required to submit it to us. If you continue to do so, we will not provide the funding that we typically would, which I absolutely loved. And it was a while ago.
See, I need more of that in my life.
And it
Right.
was signed by multiple parties. It was a bipartisan letter, which I was so excited about it.
I think accountability is key in times like these, especially when you have, young enlisted that are following orders, and everybody will say, oh, it's not an excuse. But when you're 18 in the military, like, you're trained to look to your NCO, and your NCO is going to look to their first sergeant, and the first sergeant is going to look to the commander, who's going to look all the way up. And the people up top, the problem is, and we've learned this, is, and everybody knows this, nobody knows the ramifications of it, of the JAG officers being fired, is nobody is looking at these orders for legality anymore. And so you have these young 18, 19-year-old kids that think they're doing the right thing. And it puts everybody in a very weird position, I believe, because I don't think, at 17 when you joined, right? You think you knew what an unlawful order looked like definitively?
Absolutely not. I
And
was
so
17, and a lot of young people in the military, and I know there's the rhetoric in the administration right now after Senator Mark Kelly spoke up that every service member knows this. The majority of service members are very young individuals. And I say this as someone who enlisted at the youngest possible age. I didn't turn 17 until I was a good portion of my way into my training. I was out of boot camp. I graduated boot camp at 17. I was in my nuclear training to become a nuclear mechanic technician. And that's when I turned 18. Our service members are very young. And the assumption that every single person understands completely what a lawful or unlawful order is, or knows they have the ability to say no to an unlawful order, is very assumptuous. And they say it as a rhetoric so that there isn't that conversation being happened. The same way that we can with military sexual or trauma or rape, is just ignore it completely and be like, everyone knows rape's wrong, everyone knows rape's wrong, instead of directly coming up and talking about it. Because no, it wasn't until a good portion into my service where we had a long conversation. And again, it's because I'm in the nuclear program where they're very clear with what is a lawful order and what is an unlawful order. Because if you do something wrong when nuclear power, it is a very unforgiving field. So we have a very open dialogue about it, but not every job does. And sometimes the most important jobs definitely don't.
I can say, so I was chem bio, and it wasn't in schoolhouse, right? Like, we didn't talk about unlawful and lawful orders, which you think you would in a chemical and biological warfare schoolhouse. It was not fully addressed until later in my career when I was an NCO and in charge of equipment. And so I think that those conversations are needed, right? And our veterans in our group and in partner groups around the country have been having conversations with National Guard in the street. And one thing that we found interesting, right, is I thought as an NCO, I'd be like, oh, let me go talk to the NCO, right? No, it's the E4 Mafia that you got to go find and talk to. And that's disheartening, right? Because you said it earlier, not everybody in the military is a good person. And I tell this to people, and hear me very clearly, people watching. Not every veteran is a good person. Most veterans are shitbags. Like, most veterans are not great human beings, right?
I could be very lucky, but I've had a couple, I would say not every veteran is a good person, but I would say most of them in general, but I will say I'm a very optimistic person when it comes to people. Similar to how I would say not everyone in the military is a good person, not every veteran's a good people, but the majority of them genuinely try to be. And sometimes it's a matter of education. We learn stuff all the time. Not education as
Yeah.
in academic education,
I'll
but
give you some.
in what biases we're taking in, that sort of things.
Yeah.
I learn things constantly. I learn new things. My opinions on things develop and change over time. And a lot of times experiences with veterans come down to that. But it also could be that the veteran population that I interact with a lot in Central Florida are people that I have similar dialogue to, I would say, and that whatever realm we're in, if we're dealing with veterans healthcare, we're for the most part talking about veterans healthcare and having discussions about it, or if we're in veterans kind of access to different programs like education, I'll be talking to people who are talking about that. But I'd say most veterans try to be good people. Because everyone also, I will say, everyone again joined for a reason, and usually even the veterans resonate with their own reason for joining. And
Yep.
so when they talk about military, and again, I have to give it through the sphere that when I'm talking to veterans, it's usually very pinpointed what we're talking about, whether it's whatever topic we're talking about, usually very on topic. So there's a lot less kind of open-ended conversation in that aspect. But most of the time, people stick to talking about their own service. They view it through the lens of why they joined. And again, I have to say, people join for a lot of different reasons, and I don't agree with all of them. But for the most part,
Agree with you on the point that, especially like in the advocacy space, right? And because I've been involved in veteran specific advocacy now for like over a decade, is you are correct. When you are in a room full of people who are talking about one very specific issue within our community, it's all ideologies, right? Sitting there talking about how do we fix suicide? How do we fix healthcare? How do we do this as a community for the betterment of our community? But I will say, outside of the advocacy space,
that's why I wanted to give the disclaimer. My conversations are typically through a specific lens.
like, I'll put it to you this way, right? I'm in Clay County, Florida, Orange Park. What was this, like last weekend, Rory? I think I checked in at this action. And other veterans were screaming at me. Um, all that my sign said was Veterans Against Fascism. It was like, it was intense. And I'll put it to you this way. I look at it through a lens of an MST survivor that spent years in the space, that every woman I know, every woman I have ever met has a story. May not be of sexual assault, but it's at least of sexual harassment. I've met now probably about 15 or 16 men that knew rapists. And in a space of like silence is complicity, is I think that a lot of veterans are primed to not call out poor behavior. And I think when you are in the service, it's just kind of a bro club. But once you become a veteran and you get away from that space, if you don't better yourself and you don't start seeing that for what it was, and for doing better outside of a very male dominated macho place, and you don't start looking at life without the militaristic lens and start looking at people as people, you're not a particularly good person, because you are going to see everybody through the lens of the military. And that is just not fair when we only make up 6.2% of the population. Right. And you see that rhetoric across the country today. And I know that I talk to a lot of veterans that do not particularly believe in what I'm doing currently in my life, because of all of my involvement in veteran advocacy, right? Is I know all of these people from like vast different political spectrums, and then they see my Facebook page and see me doing the Lord's work, screaming at people on Facebook, and trying to educate them. But then I also see them like, oh, I voted for this. Yeah, like, or I think Rory saw the conversation with the guy on our TikTok one day talking about deported veterans. And that's a massive problem in our community. It is a massive problem. Like, there is a study for
Absolutely.
people watching. Please read the study that was put out by USC, Berkeley Law. It is the second Google it, homeless deported veterans, second one, PDF. 96,000 veterans have been deported since Vietnam. And when you try to talk to that openly in a veteran community of both sides, there is a large number of veterans across the country that believe they should have just gotten their citizenship while they were in, without understanding that it's not like a 1, 2, 3 process and you get it. That there are plenty of veterans that serve the country, that have Purple Hearts, that have all of these awards, that are not citizens of this country. And then you see the rhetoric of them just being like, they gotta go. And I don't think that makes you a good person inherently. And so when I say most veterans, that's what I mean, is there is 6.2% of the population is veterans. If most veterans were good people and speaking out right now about the shit that's happening, it would stop. Because veterans' voices hold power. And that's what I mean by most, is that we don't utilize our voices and our power for good. And we should. And unless you're like out here, and I don't care if you're on social media, like just saying it's bad, right? Veterans' voices hold power. And if you're not speaking out for the vulnerable, then why the fuck did you take the oath? Like, why? And it makes you not a great person in a lot of people's eyes across the country. And so that's why I said it, is that historically it takes 3.5% of the population to change something societally, and veterans are 6.2% of the population. So if we all spoke out and did the right thing and followed our oath to the Constitution, society would change. But that's a personal opinion. It is not a 50-51 vets opinion. I'm sure my vice president is watching this losing her fucking mind currently. But you know, like, I can't get behind that most veterans are good, or they'd be speaking out. I wouldn't see them in groups talking shit about deported veterans and mothers getting shot in the street, right? And being like, oh, just comply. Like that, like, you're not a good person. You're a shit.
I'm going to say one thing first, and also this. So after Pete Hegseth's address to all the top ranking people in the military, and his belief on what he thought the biggest problem in the military was, the woke agenda and climate change. I addressed that and said the biggest problem in the military is that we have the wealthiest military and we need to take better care of our service members. I did not say anything controversial. The video still is out there of me saying we need to take better care of our service members. I talked about the sleep rotation. I talked about the quality of food, the timeline of work, the fact that they're working 12, 18, 20-hour shifts, having one meal. If they're on a ship, they might not access the galley at that time. If they can, if the galley is going to be open, it's only open during set times. They're still expected after these 18-hour shifts to work out. If they're in port, they're going to have duty and then a work day and then followed by another work day and then duty again. And this constant rotating shift work and the inability to have an adequate amount of sleep and doing maintenance on top of the work you're already doing, on top of the watch you're standing, on top of all of these things. And it had a very specific Navy ring to it because I was speaking from my personal experience as a Navy sailor. And talked about how we need to just take better care of our service members. And I got the most unpatriotic reception to that. Again, just saying we should take better care of our service members as the most wealthy military, as the strongest military force in this hemisphere. We need to take better care of our service members or we will never be a ready force. We will never be as good as we could be. And people, what do you know about service? What do you know about this? You're a disgrace to the uniform, blah, blah, blah. So I understand completely on that. I will say in a heartening and inspirational moment, the amount of combat veterans I've seen in both parties. I'm a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I'm subscribed to a lot of Veterans of Foreign Wars sites and content and the hashtag and all of those things. The amount of content I've seen from people who are like, I'm a registered Republican, I'm a combat veteran, I'm a registered Democrat, I'm a combat veteran, and I want to speak on DHS and ICE current conduct and the fact that trained professionals are acting as though civilians should have the same stress response as trained individuals who are trained for combat is outrageous, and they'll go in depth on the training they received as a combat individual who partook in actual armed operations. And saying we have these SOPs, or for people on the military standard operating procedures, where we had to follow these to a T, and the person implicating it and following through and making sure it was being done was a 21-year-old who was doing it to the T, even in high-stress operations, because of the fact that we are trained to do so. And speaking out against current ICE operations and saying those things, I have seen that from both sides, and that has been extraordinarily great. And just in a moment of brief good news in what can feel very dark times.
I am proud of my brothers and sisters in uniform that continue to speak out, and veterans about what's happening, right? I will say this: in Jacksonville the other day, when I saw people jump out in full battle rattle, and Rory knows what it is, like jump out in full battle rattle that I wore. I was like, oh wow. Huh.
More need to speak out, though. I do agree with you on that.
Yeah,
it's 100%.
It makes me sad, right? As a generational veteran, I have 2 daughters, and I would love for them to join. But
I've spoken to a lot of veterans. I would join because I joined for a specific reason and a specific program. I've talked to a lot of people I served with, a lot of women that I've served with in the same job, who said that given these current times, even if they were in the same position, they wouldn't join again. Even if they were 17 and they were faced with the option to join, even for whatever reason they joined for, I'm seeing an increased number of people saying they wouldn't have joined again. Which again, with this very anti-women in the military rhetoric we're seeing from the administration, I believe that's the goal, is to discourage incoming young women and incoming women professionals from joining the military.
Yeah. And one of the things you're speaking of is, community resilience, which is part of your platform. And that looks, and I saw that it was clumped in with disaster funding. And since we live in Florida, right? We love to get hit by hurricanes here, and Rory lives in North Carolina, and they got a hurricane. Rory, y'all weren't specifically hit, were you?
Not
Rory,
by
where are you in North Carolina? I grew up in North Carolina.
y'all too, Fort Bragg.
I grew up in Charlotte.
Okay. Yeah, Fort Bragg area is ish, but not by that one. But Michael came through.
Matthew and Florence.
I gotcha. We got hit by Matthew. And so living in our state of Florida, we are no strangers to disasters here of fires, flooding, all sorts of weird stuff. We have invasive species. Florida's buck wild, y'all. But speaking of disaster funding, right? And I saw in a congressional hearing the other day where they said that Director Nome is not doing her actual job for FEMA. And we live in a state that's, and Rory also lives in a state that has used FEMA funding in the past for natural disasters. And so, what's your idea for disaster funding and resilience, especially in a state that we talk about it often and openly?
It's not enough to have funding reserved. It's not enough to say we have it. We need consistent, adequate funding that people can actually access. Like you said, we live in Florida. It's not a matter of if a hurricane is going to come, if a tropical storm is going to come. It's a matter of when a tropical storm, when a hurricane, when it floods. And we've seen with Florida having an emergency fund separate from the federal fund, them saying we have it, but then never accessing it for anything. So that's why I specify that it's not enough to say we have it. We need to be able to have access to it. We need to be able to utilize it. We need to have quick action plans in place, almost like a standard operating procedure for natural disasters, ones that aren't demographically or politically incentivized, ones that have standardized metrics of when we're going to implement and utilize it. Because something that we've also seen in Florida and also across the nation is that using emergency funding and FEMA and community resiliency programs as a political gain, to use it to get something or to incentivize a certain area. And we've seen like political trigger points rather than metric trigger points in order to have a standardized reason and why and when we will implement it in order to carry it out. So that kind of goes into streamlining the process, which I believe I specifically call out on the website as well, is streamlining the process by having actual metric points, by having it accessible, by having emergency plans in place that can be readily implemented so that every time it happens, because again, it's going to happen in Florida. These things are going to happen. We don't need to scramble to figure it out every single time. We can have standing orders and standing procedures in place. And and most people who are going to watch this know, because we were in the military where those things are, again, part of a standard operating procedure. People will say it's an emergency. You can't have a standard operating procedure. You do. They're called emergency operating procedures, and they're a standard operating procedure. And then funding the forecasting and funding properly the warning systems in order to ensure that we are prepared ahead of time, and that then we can then have those procedures to implement, and we can make sure they're fairly accessed. And so that's how we can do it as well.
I agree. I think that's a really good plan. Up here in Jacksonville, we're a little bit unique. We don't take hurricanes as seriously as we should. I remember Michael went through Tallahassee and devastated Mexico Beach. And I happen to be in Tallahassee right now. And I went over to Mexico Beach with my in-laws, and I was shook at the destruction of hurricanes, because Jacksonville's unique. We haven't had a direct hit since 1956, Hurricane Dora. Irma did damage here. It was like the St. Johns River broke the bank, and the river was in the middle of downtown. And that was problematic. But I do know that hurricanes across the state are getting worse. They're going up to places like North Carolina, who is not like normally ready for hurricanes like we are. And so I was glad to see that disaster funding and resilience was on your platform, especially as a Florida candidate. What do you think about? Go ahead.
There are places out here, businesses and everything that still haven't rebuilt from hurricanes 2 years ago because they can't properly access the funds and they can't properly almost incentivize the building plan without the cost being so astronomically high because they can't access emergency funding like that to reopen or take this. So they're still just there and broken down. What was your follow-up question?
Oh, no. I'll get back to it. I think that that's important, right? Especially in like your district and in Jacksonville, even though we don't get direct hits, we do have damage. And you see that around the state, right? And I think it's going to lead into what I was going to talk about was insurance, right? In the state of Florida.
Homeowners insurance. Something I
Yeah.
talk about a lot.
Right? Is I'm a homeowner. I see my insurance rates rise every year. And although like mine's different because it's like put into my escrow. I do worry about like my mom who is on a fixed income or people that can't afford homeowners insurance keep going up. And do you have any federal plans to try and fix that? I know the state is actively working on it. We're in session right now in Florida, and there was a few bills that were trying to address it. But do you just think from like a federal standpoint, there should be some sort of legislation?
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of it is a state thing, but we're seeing insurers in the state of Florida leave en masse to go to other states or to stop providing access in Florida, and a fifth of homeowners in Florida are not insured, meaning they don't have homeowners insurance, and then a good other percentage can't access the coverage when they need it in a timely manner. And so between the difficulty in gaining coverage or maintaining coverage because of the premium skyrocketing, we can stabilize and incentivize homeowners insurance market in the state in order to allow people to have coverage and to prevent it from skyrocketing like that, because people are going to be priced out. We're seeing it, homeowners insurance, healthcare premiums. We're seeing all sorts of insurers skyrocket their premiums and their costs and then not let people access them. And so a lot of it is through the state, and the state is introducing a lot of things to regulate it because it is a giant problem across districts, across party lines. Everyone is suffering from it. And in a state like Florida, you absolutely need homeowners insurance. You absolutely do, because again, hurricanes are going to happen. Tropical storms are going to happen. High winds and flooding are going to happen. And so incentivizing and regulating the market would definitely be a helpful thing because people need it.
Yeah, I agree. Seeing that devastation on Mexico Beach, I'll just never forget it. And interestingly, there was the one house that survived Hurricane Michael on Mexico Beach, and we studied it in our degree. I have a degree in
awesome.
construction management from the University of North Florida, and we studied that house and why it was the only one that still stood after that storm, and it was just fascinating from that standpoint. But yeah, insurance is crazy out here. So we ask a few, I don't find them controversial, some people do, questions as we wrap up. And we wrap up in a fun way. You're going to know what's happening whenever we have civilians on. They don't, but you will. So we talk about Palestine a lot in our group, and as a matter of fact, when we started doing these lives, none of us knew that you get money, like people give you money. We didn't know that. And so we have made it, I have made it a policy to give money to people like families in Gaza when they go live, so that we run out of money. Israel. We would like, as a group, more politicians to commit to stop funding Israel and the genocide that's happening and has happened. Just as a group, we didn't think genocide was controversial, but apparently it is. And are you on board with stopping funding to Israel?
I am. I do not agree with the policies Netanyahu and his people in power have implemented. I don't agree with the United States continuing to fund Netanyahu's wars and decisions and the absolute humanitarian crisis that he has created in Gaza. Any of it at all, to the point where I've taken civil disobedience actions with Veterans for Peace and another organization, Veterans Against the Machine, which I, as an individual, not as a campaign, are a part of, because I agree with the organizational statements and what they for, but I do not agree with any of the action or us funding Netanyahu's decisions or the continued war that he is committing and the crimes against humanity, the crimes against children and civilians that, again, Netanyahu is taking. And I've spoken out pretty extensively about it, just from a purely, my personal opinion, and then to reach people who might not agree on a nonpartisan level, is that the United States sends billions of dollars to continue to fund Netanyahu's decisions, despite continuing to say that we don't have the ability or the funds to house homeless veterans or our own starving children and seniors here. We will continue to give billions to Netanyahu in order to fund his bombs and his missiles and his humanitarian crisis that he's creating. And that's a way that I frequently phrase it for people who might be dissuaded just purely from a partisan standpoint. And it's not partisan. It's a direct decision of our legislator due to personal gain or personal money in their pocket or lobbyists who continue to fund his things and deny our own American taxpayer dollars to go towards anything that benefits a single United States citizen.
Yeah, I agree. And, our state is one of the only states that bought Israeli war bonds. The state of Florida invested our state pension fund money in Israeli war bonds to the tune of, I think it was like 335 million.
Again, we send billions of dollars overseas, billions of American taxpayer dollars overseas to buy bombs. There's constantly money for bombs and missiles and start to prevent children from gaining food and to bomb hospitals and to allow Netanyahu to make any decision he wants with. But we can't invest our own American tax dollars over here, whether it's war bonds, whether it's missiles for them or fighter jets. We have to stop funding it. We cannot send any more American tax dollars over there.
We agree, and we're happy to hear you say it. We're against genocide, and we agree with the stopping of funding. If we can't afford healthcare here, probably shouldn't be spending billions elsewhere. Last controversial thing that some people find controversial, some people don't. We're going to talk about transgender service members.
The Gaza and Palestine is not controversial. It can't be. We cannot make it. It is controversial, but it should not be.
We had someone on recently that just kind of skirted the question and did not directly answer. So
I'm glad you asked people.
Yeah, I look for, and it's always fun with veterans, right? Is veterans know how we talk to each other. Like, if I ask you a question, I want a direct answer. We don't beat around the bush with each other. And sometimes when we're doing this with civilians, they just talk around it. And I'm like, it was kind of a yes or no. But transgender service members is always kind of a weird discussion, even within our own community. I did not serve in a time that open trans members could serve. I served from 2007 to 2014. So I was in for the changeover of DADT, but not openly trans members. So I know you were in from the dates you gave, and so was Rory. And it is our belief that people should be able to serve openly. A. B, that policy should not change depending upon administration, because that's what's happened here, is that Trump took office, it changes with every president. We also don't think that. But one of our bigger things as a group of veterans is our trans veterans brothers and sisters who are not receiving care at the VA any longer.
I was about to say our administration has made it so that even if they served a while ago with birth gender associated, and then they transition when they get out, they're removing the honorable service they did by removing all the associated earned healthcare, earned education benefits, that sort of thing. They're undoing honorable service. They're erasing honorable service when they do that.
Yes, we'd like to see all of that restored, right? I know when I was in, when DADT went away, it's not like, and I think people have like this misconception about that changeover. One of my personal friends, she's in this group, you've seen her in our chat. She was kicked out for being gay back in the day. And
for anyone who doesn't know, DADT is Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Oh yeah, my bad. I forget. We love our acronyms.
I love an acronym.
Yeah, it's like I do it all the time to civilians, and they're like, "What's that mean?" And I always forget. We love a good acronym. The changeover wasn't as crazy as people seem, right? It's like our battalion commander made an announcement, everybody kind of shrugged, everybody knew who was gay. Now we could just kind of hang out with our girlfriends or boyfriends in public. And so instead of our barracks. And it wasn't that big of a deal. And from what Rory and our younger veterans have told me, it was the same, right? With trans service members, like nobody in the service cared. It was people outside of the service that tended to have a bigger opinion than the people actually serving.
Completely agree with that, with the exception of some billet restricted items, because just some billets in general you can't be on a prescription medication for, because, which I agree with, like if you need an inhaler or you have long-term medicine requirements, there are just some billets you can't perform. Some things that are very operational, you might be on a submarine and need to be underwater for a certain amount of time and you can't risk running out of a medicine that needs to happen, and you get surfaced and you go to a surface ship. If you get sub-disqualified for a medical thing like that, where you just need a regulated healthcare prescription item that's readily accessible. Outside of any billet-related things, the majority of people, we had a trans service member on our ship briefly, and for a couple of underways, I never heard narrative that anybody cared.
That's
if
the
you
thing.
Performed the job.
It's a misnomer, even within our own community. And it's just like, who cares? Like the prescription policy has not changed.
Mhm.
Like it's not like we let transgender service members serve and then all of a sudden another policy change and another policy change. It's just not how that works. The same policy for combat deployability of medication has been the same. I looked it up since like 2007 was the last one. So I think it's such a bad faith argument, and I'm tired of having it in our community, quite honestly.
I think it's also just a slap to the face to all of our veterans who they're denying healthcare to, despite having, again, and I always stress this, they completed their service honorably. You don't
Yes.
get to erase honorable completion of service.
And I think it's like the bigger conversation that we've had openly, I guess, as a group is like men get testosterone. Women at
I
the
know a
VA.
lot of men in the military who are on testosterone who get it as a supplement or take testosterone and get it. And like, I know a lot of men who do that.
And then women, we get estrogen if we're like perimenopausal, premenopausal, like I just don't understand the debate around the issue, especially of completed contracts. And the entire VA motto is to care for those who bore the battle. And it says men specifically, but it was changed and it was stupid. It was changed back to men. It was made more inclusive, but then, the EI was erased. So I love this conversation. Last question we ask everybody, because we think it's the most important question, is if you are elected, how will you stay grounded to your constituents?
By continuously being in the community and performing. A lot of people think that the role of a representative is to only go to DC, but by performing the duties of a representative, you have to be in districts. You have to be constantly communicating. It's supposed to be the most dynamic, most active, most constantly moving branch of the government. That's why the terms are 2 years, because the intention is to have them always be in their community, always be campaigning, always be talking with community members. Your job is not to go sit in DC and live in DC full time. It's to go to DC to advocate for your community and then come back to your community to then implement that advocacy, to continue to listen, to continue to meet them every single day, to take the information you got in DC and then have an open line of communication back to your constituency, but to primarily fight for them every single day. And that includes being in the community. And for me, I will always be grounded simply due to my family upbringing. It's not an abstract concept. I'm not swinging in from some palace. I am very much, it is a lived experience. And when the majority of your life is ruled by the government, by being at the government's mercy, via through assistance programs or via in the military, when you are still very much at the government's assistance or the government's mercy, if you will, it is a lived experience. It is 27 years. And so that grounding comes through the reminder and the remembrance of exactly where you came from, the struggles that you lived and bore throughout your entire life, and then the continued advocacy of being an active community member and being, just in the most blunt terms, an active living community member where you're constantly there and constantly in communication. A reason why people don't feel represented is because people go to DC, the incumbent that I'm challenging goes to DC and then never really comes back and doesn't do any real work in order to benefit the community beyond just existing in DC. And so the intention, and we do have some good reps out here that do this often, is to constantly be moving and constantly be in your community. That is the most fundamental way. Is you can't forget where you came from. You can't forget the lived experiences you had, which I'm very lucky to say that they are completely what made me up. I don't think I could ever forget them if I tried. They're ingrained in me in every decision I make and every action I have. And I don't think we run a risk of it because of it.
I like it. All right. So how we close out, you tell us. We close out in two ways. Number one, tell us where to donate, how to get involved in your campaign, how we can help, where's your next event, things of that nature.
Absolutely. You can get involved again. I'm Marialana Kinter. I'm running in Florida's 7th district, and you can get involved in kinterforcongress.com, and that is the word for FOR, kinterforcongress.com. I am on all social media as Kinter for Congress. Again, the letter FOR, or just Marialana Kinter. You search me up, a very unique name. It'll always come up. And you can also donate at Kinter for Congress, or you can mail it into the P.O. Box, which you can find at kinterforcongress.com. And I have my P.O. Box up there. If you're anywhere in the state of Florida, please go on and sign my candidate petition so that I don't have to pay $10,440 to the state. That will subsequently get wasted, as we know. We can get 2,564 petitions in order to waive the, again, $10,000. fee for that. So go on, sign my candidate petition. You can print it off at kinterforcongress.com. And then to get involved, I have my volunteering sign up on my website as well. We will be having a lot of in-district events. One of our big things is performing events in district, because again, you have to be active in the community in order to be an accurate representative of the community. And so last year we attended over 150 community events, and we held 28 community events. And then we have a bunch coming up in February, March, and April in terms of community events. Either it's coffee, bingo, town halls, any number of stuff to just be around and be active. And subscribe on all social media, and you can stay up to date with any events we have coming up. And thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, bet. I love the bingo idea. That's sweet. I may come down for bingo. You're actually not too far from me, so I might travel down.
Love bingo.
You never know. And we will invite you. We are a partner with Fight Against Fascism.org and the Removal Coalition. The next action is 2/28 in DC, the March for Democracy. So take this as your formal invite to come on up and hang out with us again and yell. And then next week we have Wednesday, actually, I don't know, today's Saturday. So it is next week, but TBI, sorry. Jen Brothers is coming back. She is running in Pennsylvania. We ran out of time last time, and so she will be back on Wednesday, and we are looking forward to it. So the way we close out is a safety brief. For anybody that doesn't know what a safety brief is, in the military on Fridays, close of business, you get in a formation with all of your peers, and your leaders tell you how not to be a degenerate over the weekend. And so we do this at the close of every show to remind everybody to not be a degenerate. And we start off the same way. So do not beat your spouse, children, or pet. Drink water, eat, make sure you take care of your mental health. That includes your medicine and going to see your therapist. Reach out before you crash out. Do not drink and drive. If you cannot afford an Uber and you can somehow in your drunken stupor message our page, we on any platform, we will pay for your Uber home. We would rather you get home safe, so we will pay for your Uber. Do not buy zoo animals on the dark web and then try to donate them to zoos. Doesn't work out well. In honor of the Minneapolis ICE agents, probably do not leave your operation plans in vehicles that are then broken into by people that hate you.
They did that? Not the breaking into, the leaving operational plans?
Oh, girl, you didn't see it?
What is up with this administration and a lack of operational security? Sorry to interrupt the brief. To piggyback off that, as they would say.
So we will make a safety brief out of that. How do you do it? Do not let ICE agents have 47 days of training before putting them on the road. Yeah. Also, do not conduct live fire drills, exercises in housing developments. Make sure that you protect the vulnerable. Our oath to the Constitution is also to the people of this country. And so it is our duty as veterans to protect those around us, especially the most vulnerable. What did I miss, Rory?
In case of smoke, use traffic cone and water.
Yes. Did I miss anything?
Change your socks.
Subtract from the population.
Oh yeah, do not add or subtract to the population.
Unless you're planning to.
I was about to say, unless you are trying to add.
Or subtract. That's a personal choice. Or not, like, that's your own choice.
Just know there's consequences to choices.
There are. We're not advocating. Please, God, we are not advocating, but that's your own personal choice, and we believe in individual liberty. So, and as Rory said, change your socks. Make sure that if you are in the activist space, advocacy space, like we are 24/7, that you are taking time to get away from this space and spend time with people you love. It doesn't have to be your family, just people you generally love and like. Get and spend time away from this space. It is very draining. And check on your battle buddies.
Touch grass.
Go touch grass and check on your battle buddies, especially if you haven't heard from somebody in a while. Please reach out to them. You never know if a phone call could make a difference and save a life. And we are all ears. If you ever need someone to talk to, message our page. And I think that is it. I don't think I missed anything else.
I think that's pretty much it. Unless
I think that is it. And just a friendly reminder, fuck ICE. So thank you for coming on. I look forward to watching your run. I will come down. I will commit to you right now. I will come down to one of your events because you are close enough to me that I will come attend. And we do have some vets in your district that I'm sure would love to help out. So you know how to find us. We're in the same space. So thanks for coming on. And, any parting words of wisdom for us?
We have to stay on it. No one's coming to save us. It's the same way that I end most podcasts that I do. No one's coming to save us. It's up to us. No one is coming to save the United States. No one's coming to fix the things you believe need to get fixed. Whatever your area of specialty is, you need to get involved. You need to do it. You need to vote in the midterms. You need to vote in any local special elections you have coming up. You need to take action. Nothing will change without you changing it, without every single one of us. And remember, we can have real change. We have to do it together. We deserve real change, and we can have it. It's up to us. Every single one of us. Take care of yourself. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And everybody have a good night. Stay safe out there, especially around the country. There's increased operations. Make sure you protect your neighbors, right? That's what's most important. And document everything that's going on. Document it. But everybody be safe out there, and we will see you on Wednesday.
Later, Gators.
Bye, y'all.